I'm Rose. I'm a UX and service designer.
I'm Manwai. I'm a musician and artist. So
And we're, as Andy mentioned, we're not developers, but we're both Juilliard-trained classical musicians, so that's our traditional background. And we wanted to explore sort of augmenting the bass to see what it's capable of, especially as we interact with technology. But not being developers, and being musicians, we wanted to make sure that throughout all of this, there was some inherent musicality. So in the beginning, in the first couple of weeks, we were really just exploring what kinds of sounds we could make, and they weren't necessarily beautiful or even necessarily exciting, but they were cool and they were interesting and they were different. So we were concerned with basically input, coming from what Manwai was essentially playing. And then eventually, we started to think about what does this mean? What kind of context can we place this in? And again, have some kind of musical meaning behind all of it. And we came across a bunch of challenges. Some of those challenges were the bass is very naturally resonant. So as we were feeding music back or sound back into the bass, one of the challenges was the Manwai is creating sound, and then we're also trying to amplify sound again. So they were sort of competing with each other, and we are having difficulty balancing that. We were also having difficulty amplifying the sound in real time. Also because of that, there were just delays when you're processing music. And again, being traditional classical musicians, even being like a microsecond off is a little bit off-putting, off-settling for us. So we had to sort of come to terms with that as well. And we didn't have great hardware. What we have here is a driver and also a pickup. And these are both pretty cheap devices, so the quality of the sound itself was not ideal. But what we ended up doing was turning those challenges into real learning opportunities. With the bass not necessarily being very resonant, or with the bass being so resonant, we thought, maybe instead of competing, having these sounds competing with each other, we can have them play with each other. And instead of being so concerned with the initial sound coming out of the bass or being fed back into it, we realized that letting the sound continue to live and vibrate and resonate within the bass is something that the technology allows us to do, which the bass cannot do naturally. So we're going to explore that in our performance for you tonight. We also learned that, let's see. I guess let's just go into it and just show you what we did. Oh,
yeah, one of the challenges, the feedback like Rose has mentioned. So we switched from piezo to magnetic pickup to avoid the feedback loop pumping back into the bass. But at some point of the trial, I think one of the moments was exciting that I hear something when we first recycle the acoustic back into the bass is I hear certain contextual cues or certain timbre that is very genuine to the bass sound, very organic, natural, but ambiguous enough that it's sort of electroacoustic. You can't tell really if it is coming out of a speaker or a bass by itself. So that's my whole idea of begin this experiment is to really explore the boundary between the organic and inorganic. Like at what point you think that sounds is starting to become unnatural. And for professional musicians, we spend a lot of time to fine-tune the details, the timbre, the tonality. And what distinguishes between different instruments are the volume, the timbre, and these fine little details between $1 million Stradivarius and a $20 Palatino. So if it could be potentially, if we, with the right hardware and software, and we could tune it to place it, if we shrink the whole system down, we could basically democratize certain type of sounds and timbre, not only with the instruments, but we could also control the space. Like when we play the instrument, we learn to play the space as well. Just like singer learn to how to vibrate every particle in the air. What's the sympathetic resonance of the room? Usually it's the B flat is vibrating, or what kind of corner the apples are facing, and how is it going to tune into people's ear, right? It's just like you turn a professional engineer finding the reflection points of the speaker. So with this, we can basically expand and bring a concert hall on with a different convolution of reverbs into the instrument itself. So in that way, we could bring like a completely a different sound experience in a traditional environment. So there's definitely a lot more potential to explore. Yeah.
And thematically, we use that to our advantage today. Again, that delay, that reverb, and that feedback was a challenge in the beginning. We weren't able to like play a complete song because the sound we were putting in and coming back into the bass was just competing with it. For example, we're going to use Amazing Grace as a tune that you'll hear today. So I'm sure everyone knows that theme, but it's very pretty, it's very tonal, it resolves itself, just amazing grace, how sweet the sound, right? But with the augmented bass, you have all of these echoes, all of this feedback, all of this resonance, but then the problem with singing a simple, pretty tune like that is that it can also be meaningless. It could just be pretty and a little bit flat. But with the augmented bass, we could actually explore the concept, that theme of mourning and of loss and the actual words behind the song. So we're going to explore that harmonically and thematically as well as, augmented. Great. I actually do. Yeah, so the software that we're using is Ableton. One of our other developers was also using Super Collider, but unfortunately he couldn't be here tonight, and we didn't really want to risk wasting your time with our inability to use that. So we're just using Ableton. What you see here are 6 different channels that were created for us, and at the bottom of each channel, this will change, are different processes that have already been set. So I'll be moving through these, and we'll at first give you an example of what each channel sounds like individually, and then we'll start blending them and mixing them together. You'll know that a channel has been turned on because this button here will turn orange. So I'll try to make an announcement whenever that happens so you can hear the difference. So we're just going to go through and explore each channel individually so you can hear the initial differences. Here's the first one. Oh, and you might want to walk up and get closer because, again, our hardware is not very good, so it's not very resonant. Sorry, we thought we were having technical difficulties. So I'll move on to the next one. And here's the next channel. start blending things together.
Very nice. Does anybody have any questions for the team?
Physical feedback, if the pickup instead of magnetic, which is senses the vibration of the string, if it's piezo, which is the pressure potentiator. It senses the pressure difference. If we use that kind of pickup, then the body vibration of the bass is gonna feed back into the pickup itself, and then it's gonna recycle. And then I think there's another pickup which is inside in the software that's gonna create a feedback, and partially is the wiring and everything else also. So there are different feedbacks going on. So.
But essentially, it just makes the sound more difficult to control and unpredictable.
It's both ways. Kind of reacting to it. We don't have a lot of time to experiment with it, so every time it's very different. But originally we had someone coding a gene, one of our team members coding Super Collider, but the coding itself it's kind of complicated, so we decided to stick with the Ableton. And this is some of this are Sam's and Rose. They both chose the presets and they tweak it so that some of them is processed with intention. Some of them are kind of natural presets from the program. So
maybe I can just give a quick bird's eye view of what's actually happening here. So acoustic instrument with strings, and normally the vibration of these strings is picked up through here and inside the body of the bass, and that's normally the acoustic sound that you get. With electric or electroacoustic instruments, you have a magnetic or like some type of pickup, which is this little box here, and it has little coils that sit underneath each string, and they monitor the I'm not sure if it's I think if it's a magnetic coil, then it monitors changes in the magnetic frequency. But this is how electric guitars, electroacoustic instruments, and so on work. They monitor the subtle changes just half an inch away. And then they send the electrical signals down the wire, and then you can put that out to hardware pedals that you use to, electric guitarists will use to add echo or, add effects. But you can also run it into a computer, which can also run effects. Now, what this team did that was really unique is instead of pumping the effects, the raw sound and the affected sound back out through speakers, they put it back into the bass. So they have little miniature speaker devices, essentially, that are on the bass. And so you're getting the affected sound mixed back in with the acoustic sound. So when Manwai says he's controlling it and the computer's controlling it, it's because he's responding in real time to the control that the computer gives. Does that make sense? Okay, does anyone else have another question?
So, is it possible for your instrument to imitate more expensive instruments, like this $1 million violins and all that?
yes, actually, that's one of my intent is to somehow find the middle ground so that any instrument, the main difference between instruments are the timbre, like I said, and the volume, the projection. This goes back to, this is a 19th century technology. It's still technology, but it's different type of technology. We went from gut string to steel string and different type of hardware just so that we could increase the vibration of the physical wood itself. And then somehow along the way, the electric guitar came along and then electric bass, and we seem to skip the whole thing that if we use some of the technology that in the last century and to implement back to this, it's kind of retrospective. But the main thing about, I think, classical musicians and the classical industry in general, they're kind of mesonistic, so they're pretty hard to change. So they think, oh, that doesn't sound right, or that sounds with an amp that sounds. It's not an acoustic instrument. They're trying to be authentic and replicate what's genuine. So in part of this is really asking the question: what is genuine? What is authentic? What is the sound? What if this sound is actually what they had in mind but better? And what if? And so if we could get it run into some program software, maybe like Sphere or something, to really analyze the spectrum of different overtones of different instruments. If we can monitor different instruments and compare them, and then we could find someone to code. So you could, okay, I want to test Story sound or Stradivarius sounds, and maybe you can tune and put the device on different plates so that you could try to see what it comes out of your instrument, and it could possibly be better, or if not the same thing, and you could have a lot more potential with, but you still keeping the instrument. So